Today on Cryptic Mass Guitar, we do a comparison between the Epiphone Les Paul Standard 50s and the Gibson Les Paul Standard 50s. This is a limited edition AAA flame maple top, just in case you're curious why the flame is crazy. I'm gonna forgo the whole Epiphone versus Gibson thing. I know you're angry. I don't understand it, but I feel you. You're okay. But YouTube videos are fantastic. They're a great way of actually seeing two particular guitars in this instance that you might be looking to purchase. The only thing is in someone else's hands with someone else's amp choices, tuning choices, and setting choices, and even the choice of what they're playing. So you can't reach into the screen and play the guitar for yourself. So don't use YouTube videos as the deciding factor as to why you're buying a guitar. Just make sure you're going to the store and trying it out if you have that ability. And when you're there, try out different guitars because you never know which one's going to speak to you. But I do have 5 sound samples for you today with 5 different tunings and 5 different amps. And because it's this channel, full-on metal sound samples the last one. So that's it for all of the different sound samples. And I really hope that the tones actually came through and there wasn't too much compression. Because it's really nice to actually hear the differences between these two guitars. Because there's a little bit of subtlety. The Gibson, a little more clarity, a little more definition, a little more volume. But the standard 50s, the Epiphone here, there's not a slouch. And in the first sound sample, when you actually heard the volume and the tone turn down here, this was definitely a lot nicer. There was a lot more treble than this one here because this has 50s wiring and some nice capacitors in it. So we'll go over the specs really quickly here, and then I'll give you my opinions on both of the guitars. And I have to note, I own this, but I'm going to be selling this, and I've rented this. So take that however you want. But I'm not going to tell you which one you should buy because that's really up to you, your hands, your body, and what's in your wallet. Both of these guitars here have mahogany backs. They're slab mahogany backs, non-weight relieved. The Gibson is definitely like a pound or so heavier. And they have a carved maple top on them. Now, the Epiphone here on the front, it's a two-piece maple veneer. And on the back, it's a veneer for the mahogany. So they do that to actually hide what the wood looks like. And then, of course, hide how many pieces are in each guitar. So generally, you would look at the bottom of the guitar. And this one's a little hard to tell. It looks like it's a three-piece top. It looks like there's a piece here and a piece here. But it's hard to tell. It could just be a little bit a slight difference in the color on the one on this side here. So this is either a two-piece mahogany body or a three-piece mahogany body. This is definitely a two-piece mahogany body. The finish on the Epiphone is polyurethane, which is a polymer. There's someone that keeps telling me that polyurethane is plastic, but polyurethane is a polymer and plastic is a polymer. So polyurethane is used as a plastic substitute. So that's sort of like saying, like, juice is a liquid and water is a liquid. But, like water isn't a juice kind of a thing. I'm still a little sick if that didn't make any sense. Whereas the Gibson here has a gloss nitrocellulose finish. Both guitars have mahogany necks. This has what's supposed to be the 59 medium C neck carved to it. However, it's not really a 59. It's a little thicker than a slim taper, I would say. This one here, the Gibson, has a fatter 50s vintage style neck on it. It's not the full baseball style neck, but it's pretty thick. We have a laurel fretboard here, whereas we have a rosewood fretboard here. This has a scarf joint for the headstock to be put on, and there's also a joint that comes out of the body at the neck heel here for the neck to go into the body. On the front of the headstocks, where you're going to find the inlaid Gibson and Epiphone logos and the Les Paul model logos. Both guitars have the standard truss rod cover. The Epiphone has the bell style 3-screw, whereas we have the 2-screw on the Gibson. Both have Graphtec nuts as well. The tuners that are on here are the modern sizing, not vintage sizing. But the Epiphone Vintage Deluxe tuners and the Gibson Vintage Deluxe tuners, which they're rather similar, but it just feels like the Epiphone's just a little bit thinner, like by maybe a millimeter. Like there's not much, but both of these hold their tune perfectly fine. Pickup wise, the Epiphone has the Epiphone Pro Bucker 2 in the bridge and the Epiphone Pro Bucker 1 in the neck. Gibson, we have the Burst Bucker 2 in the bridge and the Burst Bucker 1 in the neck. Both guitars have 2 volume and 2 tone. The Epiphone has CTS potentiometers. The Gibson has CTS audio taper potentiometers. Here the pots are soldered, but the pickups are connected via a quick connect, which is a little odd, but it's beneficial because if you don't know how to solder and you just want to change it to like different Epiphone pickups that are quick connect, you can do that pretty easily. The Epiphone also has 50s wiring, and we have some very nice larger size capacitors. They look like they could be paper and oil. It's hard to say. The Gibson here has modern wiring with orange drop capacitors. 50s wiring, basically, if you start to turn down the volume, it doesn't darken the tone, but if you start to turn down the tone, it starts to bring down the volume ever so slightly. It'll actually clean things up a little more when you're doing that. Whereas the Gibson with the modern wiring, if you start turning down the volume, it darkens the tone, but the tone doesn't really affect the volume at all, really. And there's some people do say for the 50s that there's a little bit more high end when you're playing in high gain. I haven't necessarily noticed that myself, and I have quite a few guitars that have 50s wiring. And then finally, bridge wise, we have the Epiphone lock tone bridge, which has 3 saddles facing one way and 3 saddles facing the other way. I haven't had good results, except for this one, for the lock tone bridge. Usually the screws are a little bit of lower quality to adjust your intonation, and they start to just buzz. And the buzz, actually, from all the ones that I've rented so far, just gets worse over time. And that's like in the span of a week or two. The Gibson has the ABR1 bridge, which has 2 saddles facing one way and 4 saddles facing the other way. It's not drilled into the body like the custom shop reissues. Some people are a little upset over that because these are so expensive. But it's I don't know, it's the choice they made. So in a nutshell, those are the specs. So what I'll focus on now is giving you my thoughts on both of these guitars. I have to reiterate here, I own the Gibson. I will be selling the Gibson, but the Epiphone here I've rented. So if I had a dog in the fight, it would, I guess, be this one here. This has been my favorite Gibson USA guitar by far. And I do own Gibson USA pre-custom shop Les Paul Custom. And this, I prefer to that one there. So, I mean, like, you have to take that into consideration here. But to me, I don't like recommending, just like blanketing, saying, well, yeah, you need to buy the Gibson because it's more expensive and this and that. Because it depends on your needs, depends on your likes. Some people don't like nitro finish. Some people prefer satin. Some people prefer poly over it. And, you know, your wallet really comes into things. It's just not something that I'm going to do here. And I have to say, this is fantastic. To me, if you added a little more tension, switch this over to nitro finish, and you know, thicken the neck a little bit here, this would be fantastic. The pickups, you can work with them in comparison to the Gibson. Like there's clarity and definition differences. There's a little more top end, but there's different things you can do. You can just adjust that on your amp. There's different things that you can do. But the fact that this has 50s wiring, and this doesn't. To me, as someone who, especially for leads and some cleans, I'm not a very well-rounded guitar player, as I don't have my tone set to like 8 at all times and my volume to like 9.5. But when it comes to leads, I generally bring my tone down and my volume to like 9. And then, I make my adjustments from there. And a lot of times when it comes to leads, I'll just pop it right in the middle position, and I'll actually swap around the volumes until I get some sort of blend that's very nice. And usually I have like the neck dialed back a little bit for some reason. It just gives me a little more of a sweeter tone. So the fact that this has 50s wiring and this doesn't, that's huge. I really wish that the Gibson had 50s wiring. I mean, it's not hard for me to swap that out. It's pretty easy to actually change that and pretty inexpensive to do that. It's just changing the lugs in which the tone meets the volume, or the capacitor meets the volume from the tone, and which lug is, set to ground and everything like that. But the fact that this stock comes with 50s wiring is just so beneficial to a player that might be starting out. If this is, I shouldn't say starting out, but you know what I mean? When you buy this guitar here, if you're not someone that's well versed in, playing with your volume and your tone, this is really going to help you out, because when you start bringing down your volume, the tone doesn't go really dark. You know what I mean? You're retaining a lot of that top end. And yes, when you're bringing down the tone, it can affect the volume, but a lot of times that'll just start cleaning things up. And that just means you know what I mean? If you're in a recording scenario, there's a little more that you can mess around with your controls. But I just find guitars with 50s wiring, if you're someone that actually uses the volume and tone, it's just a lot more beneficial than the modern wiring. And I personally haven't experienced that, like, where they say like, oh no, modern wiring isn't good for high gain because it just sends through a little more high end in the signal. Maybe that's just working out for me. But I don't know, I haven't really experienced any negatives with that. And the upgraded capacitor in here just really surprised me. I thought when I opened it up, I would look and see there's just that, typical little generic red capacitor. But these, they're a fair size. When it comes to the Gibson, just for me, the fact that this has a thicker neck is just a little more comfortable to my hands. I am someone that prefers nitro finish over a poly finish. The poly, oftentimes, like, if I can understand when people don't like nitro, because if you get an oversprayed nitro neck, which I haven't had from Gibson in a very, very long time, but 2007, little rough year for me. But an oversprayed nitro neck, when you're playing it, after a little while, like as your hand starts to sweat, it'll react to the lacquer, and it'll actually start to get like this weird Play-Doh-y feel, and it's a little restrictive when you're going up and down the neck. I mean, at that point, if you wipe it once, you're good for like another half hour before that'll start happening, but that's really only on an oversprayed nitro neck. On an oversprayed poly neck, it feels like you're holding plastic, and that's where it comes into, yeah, polyurethane is plastic. It's a plastic substitute. People in the guitar community like will eat you alive for saying that, even though it's like, I understand why you're saying it, but to me, it just disconnects me from the neck, from the wood in the neck. If that makes any sense, it might make me sound hoity-toity, I'm not quite sure, but it just feels like at that point I'm playing a plastic neck rather than wood with like a lacquer on it. And the Burstbucker 2 in the bridge, Burstbucker 1 in the neck, for Gibson USA, I believe is my favorite combination. I mean, like the classic 57, a little hotter, you know what I mean? And then a lot of people do prefer the classic 57 over this combination here, but they're a reserved pickup, so they're not hot, and they're not flat by any means, but they're flatter than most. So there's not like a whole bunch of emphasis on that high end and emphasis on the low end to where you have to go onto your amp and go like, why is it that I was playing that last pickup, now I'm playing this pickup, I gotta go turn down the high and the low. It just seems like with these pickups here, I'm able to dial in my amp a little more. And that could just be in my head and mean that I'm absolutely crazy, which to people who are watching an Epiphone versus Gibson video, they're hoping that I'm crazy, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, there's just... To me, I can understand if you want the Gibson, and to me, I can understand if you want the Epiphone. Whether it comes down to, you know, what's in your wallet or what your hands are saying, because there's a weight difference here as well, right? Because it could be what your back is saying if you're playing with a strap. So this is probably like a pound and a half heavier than this one here, maybe 2 pounds. It's hard to say without hopping on a scale here, or you know, putting them on a scale, but that is something to take into consideration. So a lot of people, like I said, don't like nitro. If you don't like nitro at all, don't look at a Gibson, look at an Epiphone. If you like nitro, look at a Gibson, don't look at an Epiphone. If you're looking for a lighter guitar, and it's not an SG and it has to be a Les Paul, you know, the Epiphone's going to be a better choice than this particular Gibson, but Gibson also has weight relief, like modern weight relief, which are much lighter guitars. Like, there's a whole bunch of reasons if you would like the Epiphone over the Gibson or the Gibson over the Epiphone. It's just not, don't let other people influence you. It's kind of stupid that way. And I've been in so many music stores where you see that, like, 13-year-old kid or 14-year-old kid go up to the counter, hand over like birthday money or whatever, or paper route money, I don't know, whatever it is, but they give them, you know, their money and they go, oh my God, this is awesome, I have a Les Paul. And some jerk comes up and like, yeah, way to go, kid, you got yourself an Epiphone. When you're older, you'll get a real Les Paul. And like the look on the kid's face is just like, I wasted my money? No, you got a real Les Paul. It says Les Paul on it. Just enjoy that guitar. If you want to upgrade later, you want to upgrade later. But you'll learn so much on this, and you might have this guitar forever. You never know. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too much into it. Thanks for watching.